It could, and they link together. Yeah. See, an interesting thing about Together Apart, or Tanglewood, as it was in English, is that it took me 7 years to write. Oh. And so the Fall of Ireland, which I think is called a temporary illusion in Joëlle Losfeld's beautiful edition of it, is it was like an intermediate report. Halfway through, I took another character, another couple, and he's a diplomat, and the island lost its economic sovereignty, and he's in China, and he's part of a government that is going to collapse and will have no power. So that was one moment in time, and I was actually in Beijing at the time, and when I began to write Tanglewood, it was about two couples. And I was interested in their relationships and how and one man has stayed with his wife all the time, and they're fighting and yet they love each other. And Ronan next door has fallen out with his wife and has begun again with a new wife. And I wasn't that interested in the whole property thing, but I wrote about a world that was happening around me, and then that world collapsed. You understand? So if you were a French novelist in 1913 and you began to write this novel about these couples and the young couples and their lives, and you imagine their lives, at the end of 1913 you'd be at the start of 1914 you'd be in terrible trouble, because the war comes and sweeps away all their dreams and all their ambitions. And writing Tanglewood was like that when I began to write the novel, I knew they were going to build a house between them and try and sell the house, and this is a house in their garden, a third house, a house for sale, and that would give them the money to move on with their dreams. And that I knew it would go wrong, because in novels things always go wrong, but I had no idea that the whole country was going to collapse. So suddenly, halfway through Tanglewood, I had to stop writing the book, because the world that it described had gone. And what had been a contemporary book set in the here and now was suddenly an historical book about a time that was gone. And one had no idea if the country would collapse or survive, or if the euro would collapse or survive. And all these things were happening. And I didn't want the novel, I didn't want it to become an economics lesson. It is about people and characters. And so I have friends desperate to buy a house in Dublin who wound up buying tiny little houses for 400,000 euros that are now only worth 200,000 euros. And they are trapped in those houses because they can never sell them. How do you describe that whole world? And then I realised something. That if you were a novelist and you set your novel in 1913, that you wouldn't actually need to tell the story of the First World War, because the reader would understand it. Yeah. So in some ways, you could just have those characters leading their lives, thinking their lives were going a certain way, and the reader would actually be able to fill in the gaps. So I realised that I didn't have to tell the whole story of Ireland's economic collapse. It's just there in the background, and we know more about these characters' lives than the characters themselves know. It is about separation in the backdrop of the novel, and it plays an important part of the novel, although the Irish characters never realise it, is also the separation of Yugoslavia. The wars in Yugoslavia and the atrocities in Yugoslavia, and suddenly Ireland was full of very, very hard-working East European carpenters and plasterers and builders, and they worked and they built all these gleaming apartments, and Irish people were very happy because they worked quite cheaply and they worked very, very well. But nobody ever really thought what lives did these people have before? And so, as an undercurrent in Tanglewood, there is the lives of the characters who are building the houses, and they become very, very important, and their own feuds and quarrels and the pain and the atrocities of the separation of Yugoslavia play a very important role. One of the reasons for writing the book in so many points of view is that no one person in the book knows the full story, even at the end of the book. So we, the reader, only know the story because we see all the different perspectives.